what the Church of Scientology is so afraid of.
This is SPTV.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just very quickly checking my audio to make sure. Thank goodness. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Once again, thank you, Natalie, for joining me. I think we're going to have an awesome chat tonight.
Oh, yeah. Maybe not another marathon chat. Maybe not. We don't know. You just got to see.
I know 4 hours last time, but it didn't feel like 4 hours. That's for sure.
No, when you told me that, I almost fell out of my chair. I thought maybe we were up to 2 hours. I was completely mortified.
Well, I'll tell you, the comments on that video were amazing. So many people were like, I've never in my life sat down and watched something for 4 hours, but I could not stop watching this chat.
I know. It was so sweet. I'm so incredibly thankful and feel so grateful for the people that stuck it out, especially in the live the whole time, but then would still take the time to go ahead and listen to this. It's something, so much of what I shared, I've never shared before, but more so because I just didn't think anybody would really care.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciate it.
So in our chat last time, we promoted a channel that you have called Tonka Talk, which is a podcast that you have. And then after our chat, you created a different channel specifically for Scientology content. And I want to encourage everybody watching this video to subscribe to Natalie's new channel. So that the @ is at Natalie Webster X Sea Org, but you can see it's called Scientology Life After a Cult. And you're already rocking and rolling over there. I see you did a live stream with your sister. And
Yes.
we are like that. How cool is that?
It was so incredible. My sister, who's 2 years younger than me, she's never talked about her time in Scientology and her time in the Sea organization. So this was a first for her. She just started talking about it. She would join me on Tonka Talk, my podcast. We talk about community and connection. But on Fridays, I share my Scientology story, and she started joining me. And she's been going through this new therapy, which we talk about in the live that I did with her yesterday, ketamine infusion therapy. And it has done wonders for her. I mean, this is huge for her to, after all this time, be willing to talk about it. And because you know how it is, sometimes you talk about it, it can stir a lot up, but she did great. I'm so proud of her, and she's got a lot to share.
That is so cool. I haven't listened to that, but I'll give it a go. About 90 minutes long. You know, by the way, when I watch content on YouTube these days, I watch it on 2x speed so I can cover a lot more ground. Have you tried that?
No. So it'd be like,
yeah, pretty much. But you'd be surprised how easy it is to still understand everything that's being said.
Does it? So it speeds up the whole video so people move in 2x is 2 times as fast too? Oh, that'd be kind of fun, actually. No, I'm going to have to try that.
So what we're going to chat about tonight is Scientology's drug-free world scam. And you have some really interesting perspective on this. You know, to a certain extent, all of Scientology's front groups are scams in one way, shape, or form. What was your experience with the drug-free world front group?
So the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, for people who don't know, it is a front group for Scientology, and they put out multiple booklets about different types of drugs and how you should just say no. And it's really interesting how before, when I was a Scientologist, and they're funded by, they get people to donate these booklets. Think Way to Happiness, but for drugs. That's kind of how I think about it. Is you raise money for these booklets and then you get them handed out. And so in 2007, I was sitting at work one day, working away, and I thought, I just want to do something to shake it up. Because this, again, is right before I decided to leave Scientology. I had my decision to, when I was absolutely definitely going to leave, when I made that decision into pageant. And I know, hold your laughter. It was the Mrs. Minnesota International pageant, and I was Mrs. Excelsior. I was married then, so it was a Mrs. pageant. And what appealed to me about it was each contestant needed to have a platform, so something that you were volunteering in your community and doing and raising awareness about. And I thought, I want to do something with the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, because that was something that was near and dear to my heart. My mother dealt with addiction earlier in her life. My dad did and still does, my biological dad. So I thought, why not do this and do this pageant? Because I wanted to do something, again, to kind of just shake things up. And it really changed. I mean, truly, it changed my life, but not in the ways that you might think. It really helped open my eyes more about Scientology and how, how we're always told, Scientology is the only answer, the only people with the solutions. I think that was even Tom Cruise was banging on that one. And it's one of the things that really I did like a lot of just stripping that away. And a lot of that happened for me during this pageant because you become a title holder. So I was Mrs. Excelsior, which is the city that I lived in the time. And I was going to work with the Foundation for a Drug-Free World. My platform was Say No to Drugs. It was Say No to Drugs, Say Yes to Life. That's what like my platform officially was. So then I had went and gotten a pageant coach because I had no clue. I had never done a pageant in my life. It was such on a whim that I kind of threw my tiara into the ring to do this, but I knew that I needed a ton of help. And so I got a pageant coach and started working with her and this is really what got me going, getting involved in more nonprofits and other organizations that were helping. And I started seeing like, wow, my whole life I've been told that Scientology is the only thing that can help people. They're the only group with the solutions. Yet I kept seeing group after group after group just doing things and helping a ton. So I work with this pageant coach. I spend a year promoting my platform, which is Say No to Drugs, Say Yes to Life. And little by little, I start realizing that when I would contact the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, they were more interested in trying to sell booklets, get donations for booklets than anything else. It completely wasn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would be more support in terms of spreading a specific message or giving people resources to help them and more education. And do you remember those booklets, Aaron?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All the Say No to Drugs.
I didn't even realize Scientology sold those. I thought they just gave those out.
Well, they do give them out, but they have, just like with the Way to Happiness, somebody has to pay for it because, they're not just going to print them and give them away for free.
Mm.
So the drug booklets were the same way, but I had the booklets donated to me. So somebody was paying for them. But when I would contact the foundation, I was being hit up. So, oh my gosh. In fact, I just remembered this. The guy's name was Tom something. So maybe somebody remembers. Foundation for a Drug-Free World was considered secular. So it was one of those where you had a Sea Org member running it, but it was like, Able or Bridge Publications, where it kind of really had this front that they were a secular organization. Tom was a Sea Org member. I even knew him in the Sea Org, and I cannot remember his last name to save my life right now. But he would have been working with the Foundation for a Drug-Free World. I kind of remember he had kind of like, I thought he had curly hair,
I'm
not
gonna keep an eye
red
on
hair.
the chat and see if anybody knows him. Would this guy have been in the CLO West US?
I don't remember what the Foundation for a Drug-Free World was being operated out of. So I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure his name was Tom. And I contact him. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this pageant. I want to work with the foundation to spread this message. And I think it'll be great for everyone. You know what? The first thing that he did was he tried to sell me copies of the basic books. Can you imagine reaching out to like even a legitimate organization that educated about drugs, and the first thing they wanted to do was sell you something completely different that had nothing to do with that? That was red flag number one.
Well, this was 2007, 2008. That guy wasn't probably allowed to go home and sleep until he sold a certain number of those books packages.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And that is what was happening. It doesn't matter what your job was in Scientology or even in the Sea organization. If you were speaking to anybody with a pulse and a wallet, you needed to sell them these new, repackaged, redone Scientology books by L. Ron Hubbard. So I declined. and again, kind of reiterated my point of this is what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. He kept hitting me up for these book packages over and over again, and then trying to get me to get money to, for the drug booklets and things. I'm like, hey, that's not what I'm doing here. I actually just quit talking to him then. I just was like, wow. By then, I was so deep into that this was going to be my platform, and I'd already done some media and gotten all these things lined up. So I couldn't exactly just totally bail on it. And I go through the pageant. First I go through the training because you had to walk in these really high heels. I had no idea. I picked this specific pageant. And again, it was the Mrs. Minnesota International, because you didn't have to wear a bathing suit, because I knew that was a deal breaker.
I'm trying to figure out how to share the photo that you shared with me. So if everyone, I'm going to look distracted while you're talking, because I'm going to try to figure this out real quick, but keep on going.
I will keep going. So I got this really awesome pageant coach, and her name's Holly Ernst. And she knows nothing about Scientology, has nothing to do with Scientology, just knows that, she knew she had her work cut out for her when I walked in. Because remember, I was raised feral as a child, and it just I did not, by pageant standards, I just looked completely and utterly out of place. But I felt really passionate about being able to get involved in the community and share this platform. So I kind of kept going with it. And she really helped me. She actually helped me in a lot of ways, kind of put my message together. But when I started sharing with her some of my past growing up with my dad and with his addiction, it was the first time I realized that I was really sharing with somebody what this was like. When I didn't see my dad for about 9 or 10 years after my parents split. And in my teens, not long after my mom married my grandpa, when grandpa died, that whole thing happened. I wanted to reach out and reconnect with my dad. There you go. So I'm that one right there. Oh, that was such a beautiful gown. It was this mermaid gown. I loved it so much. So this is 2008. This is at the actual pageant. That year, the woman who's number 35 there in kind of the green, she ended up winning. These are the clients. So my pageant coach was a woman that's in the yellow there. And again, her name was Holly. And so we were all her clients that were in this pageant. So Holly's got she's got her work cut out for me, with me. And I tell her about the Foundation for a Drug-Free World. I don't really want to get into the Scientology thing. I kept it really separate because it was 2007 and I was feeling more, I knew that I wanted to leave, but I just wasn't 100% on it yet. Through this experience of spending a year doing this pageant, I got really solid on it. And then later on, just completely decided to leave. So I'm learning how to walk. I'm learning all these things, how to do, the interview process that you do in the pageant, because you're judged on 3 different categories. Interview is one of them, your interview with the judges. Then you're judged on fitness. Oh my gosh. I'm glad I don't have a picture of this one, because we did not have to wear bathing suits. This was 2008 when the pageant happened. We had to wear these outfits that look like something, picture the 80s aerobic wear, where, it's like this one piece thing and with the shorts. Oh, it was horrible. It was horrific. Hardly anybody looked good in it. It was almost worse than a bathing suit. It was gross.
Have you ever seen the video of the aerobics world championships from the early 80s? Have you ever seen this? Does it ring a bell?
No,
oh
but I'm dying
my!
to.
It looks like satire, but it's completely not. I'm going to send you a link later.
No, do. I would love that. Now at least I got my Friday night figured out. I know what I'm doing. So there was a third thing we were judged on, which right now I'm kind of totally spacing on, but it was fitness. It was interview. Gosh, what was the third thing? It'll come to me. And if I remember, I'll tell you. So we get to where it's pageant weekend. And I had spent the whole year promoting this platform of say no to drugs, say yes to life. We'd gotten out a ton of booklets. I'd done multiple speaking engagements. I got to be in a parade at the Minnesota State Fair, a couple other parades, just kind of fun stuff like that. I was having a good time with it. And again, a big reason for me doing it for me is I just wanted to do something so different from what I had been doing. And it was extremely different. And I loved the women that I met. In fact, it was in that pageant, one of the contestants, her name was Molly Nicholson, and she might not even know. She might not even know this. You know what? I'm going to give her a call. At that time, her platform was she was working with the organization called I think it was RAIN, which helps victims of who've been essayed. And we were doing an event or something together and talking about what she does and her volunteering, and she would like pick up the phone and be working, talking to people who had been assaulted this way. And she was sharing a lot with me. And she was the first person that I opened up to that I had that happen to me. And Aaron, we talked about that at length and when we did our first live together, and how it was covered up by the Sea Org and by Scientology. And she was the first person that I ever admitted it to. And the way that she handled it, because remember, this is like she was a crisis counselor for people who had been essayed. And her compassion and understanding, and she was the first one. Well, she's the first person that I really, really opened up about it to, but she's also was the first person who told me that it wasn't my fault. And that was huge. Ooh, I don't want to cry so early. It was huge. Absolutely. It was, oh my gosh. But I'm prepared this time. I brought my tissue. I had held that secret in for such a long time and lived with the belief that it was somehow my fault because, like we had talked about this before, Aaron, in Scientology, and especially in the Sea organization, you're not allowed to be a victim. That is the worst possible thing I think that you can do. It's up there. And I was really having a hard time processing that. So it was easier to just never think about it. And I opened up to her and, excuse me. I was so blown away by her response. And it just made me love her even more. And these women that I got to know through this process of doing this pageant and the good work that they were doing. And these were all women that were married. So it wasn't, there was younger girls. There was a pageant for them too, the Miss Minnesota. But I was mostly, with the married women. We had more in common, and they were really doing amazing things with their platforms. So I do a lot of this work for this year, just meet a ton of people. It was a really great experience. Pageant Weekend comes. My sister Lana, who, if you watched my live on my channel, you got to see her. If not, go check it out and see her. She's just a ton of fun. She was amazing. She became like my handler. So she would help me just get things together and all that for Pageant Weekend. My sister's always been absolutely supportive of anything that I've done. So Pageant Weekend comes. It's in St. Cloud, Minnesota. My family's there. We do the whole competition and the interview and all that. And it was a really good experience. I think I was in the top 6 or 8. I did not win, but I did win the People's Choice Award and the Director's Award, which was based on how much good you did out in the community with your platform. And then I won the Interview Award. So the interview where you interview with the judges. By the time, you got any questions so far?
Well, the only thing I'm wondering, and I'll ask you later, is whether anyone in Scientology tried to tell you not to do this if they didn't like it for some reason. Not
with this. I did a lot of things that people at the org did not like. Mainly one time I thought it'd be fun to take this strip fitness class. It was a fitness class. You didn't even strip. You didn't take your clothes off. Men were not allowed. It was just women exercising on a pole. It was called strip fitness, but again, nobody stripped. And I got written up for that.
Wow.
Yeah. No. Again, it's just women. It was so much fun. And I got to tell you, I didn't realize how physical it is to get up on a pole and do that. As we were learning some of the moves, the muscles that you needed to have, I was blown away by that. It was really hard. But I totally got in trouble for that as a Scientologist because, I had done some of the upper levels. So I was not setting a good example as a Scientologist or as an OT, as an operating Thetan, which is some of the things I hated hearing that. You know how you got phrases in Scientology that you hear that just grate on you?
Yeah.
Not setting a good example as a Scientologist is one of mine. Absolutely hated it. And I was doing the strip fitness because I thought it would be a fun way to get in shape for this pageant, because I was in no way close to being in pageant shape anyway.
Oh,
So I
okay. So
thought,
they were
well,
related.
yeah, so let's do this. It'd be fun. And it was fun. And then, like I said, later on, because I was also writing for a local publication at the time, and I wrote a column about doing strip fitness. So not only did I do it, I told a whole bunch of people. Which that's the thing, one of the biggest buttons in Scientology is that anything that you do that they feel somehow puts them in a bad light, and doing something, with the word strip in it and strip fitness, they just totally had a problem with, which honestly just made me want to do it more. That was my season of rebelling. I don't know if you experienced that, Aaron, when I really kind of knew, like, I wanted to leave. I just didn't have it figured out yet. So I just kind of just started doing stuff that was like, I felt was where I felt like I had some control. Like, I want to do this. I'm not asking anybody's permission about it. I want to do it. I'm going to do it. It's exercise. I had so much fun. So I do the pageant. And like I said, I was very proud of how I did, especially winning the People's Choice Award. I thought that was great. At the end, I knew I would never do another pageant again, likely. So you get to go up and get your awards at the end, after the winner has her moment and all that. And at an event afterwards, everybody's there and you get these other awards. So I'm getting my awards and I'm going up and getting my People's Choice Award. And I knew, like, this would be like my last chance to be up on stage here as a pageant person. So I got up there and I just said, I'd like to thank the people. I gave like a little just 10-second thank you. Everybody else just went up and got their award. But of course I had to drag my moment on because I knew I was not going to do this again. And there was never at any point this support from this foundation that I was promoting, in Scientology. Really none. And I had created a youth group. In fact, I created multiple youth groups who would, we'd study the booklets and we would do events around town and the kids would hand them out and all that. And I was able to really keep it separate from Scientology, which I wanted to do because I didn't necessarily want the association. Because like I said, I kind of already knew then that I just was pulling away more and more and really waking up about it. And nobody every time I would talk to anybody from the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, all they wanted to do was just sell me books. It was lost on them that this is an opportunity to really get this message out in my community about the dangers of drugs and this and that. And that wasn't it.
So there was nobody at the Drug-Free World, Foundation for a Drug-Free World, who wanted to work with you on how to best promote the organization or anything like this. It was just, oh, will you buy some booklets?
Yes. The only person who worked with me was the local DSA, the Director of Special Affairs. So the local would be like the local OSA terminal in the Scientology organization in St. Paul. I think he ended up going to, was it Missouri? I think he ended up moving to St. Louis. His name was Brian Fessler. Some of them you might know him. His wife, Tracy Fessler, used to work in the Twin Cities. And I'm pretty sure they moved to St. Louis. He was very excited because every time I mentioned the Foundation for a Drug-Free World and L. Ron Hubbard in media, he got points for it.
Profitable images, LRH profitable images, right? Or inches of positive news press. Do you remember? I forget what their stat is. Do you know?
I think it was inches of positive press and minutes.
Right. So of course he cared because it was his stat. But ironically, the Foundation for a Drug-Free World didn't care.
Not beyond wanting to, raise money for booklets which fine, raising money for booklets. I even kind of get that. But it's like, I was like, just so gung-ho as a volunteer and really believe that this could help people. And the reaction I got just really made me feel like, of course.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, when I, was a good little Scientology staff member and a Sea Org member, I, we all thought that these front groups is what the IAS paid for.
Yeah,
To
totally.
and looking back on it, I can be like, wait a second, but there was people running around trying to get donations for CCHR and trying to get donations for the Way to Happiness. In other words, all the evidence that the IAS wasn't really paying for this stuff was right in front of our faces. We just sort of chose not to connect these dots.
Yeah.
But when people donate millions and millions and millions of dollars to the IAS, they think it's for planetary dissemination.
Yeah.
Now you go, well, there's a whole other organization in Scientology called the Planetary Dissemination Org that's always trying to raise money by selling special metal-plated e-meters. And so even planetary dissemination isn't what the IAS's money goes towards. But I don't know. I think it's important for Scientologists to understand that even when someone was trying to use a platform to create press and to get the word out and create awareness for the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, the drug-free world just wanted to know, will you give us some money for booklets?
Yeah. And for the basic books, for other Scientology books. And what blew my mind about that, I'm like, you're supposed to be this secular organization separate from the Church of Scientology. Yet you're pushing L. Ron Hubbard Scientology books and pushing to sell those, which really speaks to the intense pressure that they were under. And I'm sure the stories are ridiculous. Even my daughter, Shelby, when Shelby was in Florida training to be a staff member in St. Paul, they were all selling the basic book. She hated it. It wasn't about what they were supposed to be doing when they were there.
Yeah. Thank God I left the Sea Org just before that happened, because I would have ended up declared, right. I mean, when I hear what those guys had to put up with during that whole period where they had to stay up all night in all time zones, selling books all over the world, and then eventually selling books to each other because they couldn't find anyone to sell books to. They sell books to each other just so they could go to bed.
Yeah. Debiting money off of the account of Scientologists. My mom had that happen. She had tens of thousands of dollars on account at the Flag Land base, and a bunch of it was just debited. Books would just show up on her front door, these boxes of these new books that David Miscavige was pushing would just show up, and they were being debited from her account without her permission at all. And that happened to so many Scientologists.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So it was super disappointing that, I really was there for the purpose of wanting to spread this message, especially with, like, I had even shared like my past with my dad and the struggles that my dad had with drugs and addiction and still did. And so why this was important to me, the difference when, like, I talked about this with my pageant coach and really opened up to her about it, she got it, like, and she felt it, and she really worked with me to help me be as effective as I could as a title holder, as they called it. Sounds funny, but that's what they call it. to have this platform and try and make a difference and create this change. Whereas people in Scientology, it wasn't the same. It was about selling the booklets, or in the case of Brian, who was within the Office of Special Affairs locally, was just about the positive press that I could get, or the minutes of press that I could get. In fact, when I was doing this, I might have been when I had already, I think it was during the pageant, he asked me to do some other press for Scientology. He set me up. I was actually surprised about this. I did a radio interview on a local station about Scientology. And if you do any type of PR or press for Scientology, they really brief you for, like, drill you on it and brief you to be able to do it. And so I worked with Brian on this, and I don't even remember exactly what we were taught, like why we were even doing it. And I knew how to answer the questions because I was drilled on how to handle it and drilled on how to handle any opposition, or black PR, as they called it, about Scientology. And I heard things in this interview, questions that I would get just about, L. Ron Hubbard having, like, one of the things was he said, what was it, that the best way to make money is to start a religion, something like that. Right. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that in other places. So there was a list of all the black PR, as it's called in Scientology. Then when I would finish these interviews, I would be sat down and they would go through step by step why these things weren't true.
Oh, they would actually handle you on all the black PR that was brought up.
Yeah, except I didn't forget about it. Because again, a good Scientologist, if something comes on and it's about Scientology and it's not from the church, you're supposed to shut it off if it's negative, not listen to it, not read anything like that. And here I am, like hearing straight these questions. And then I would, volley it back and handle it. And I must have done a pretty good job because they had me do it a few times. But I would be hearing these things and thinking, where are these ideas coming from? But it also added to that crack in the armor for me of opening my eyes to the fact that I was in a cult. And it's all part of that same experience of doing this pageant and going into these different communities with different people and hearing things and seeing what they're doing and seeing how this is not aligning with what I've been told.
Right.
I could see with my own eyes.
Do you remember, like, what was the craziest piece of info you were exposed to while doing PR for Scientology that you'd never heard before?
That I'd never heard. I actually had never heard about that, the best way to make a bunch of money is to start a religion. So that one definitely, I was like, what? I hadn't gotten on the internet yet. So I got to see so much more later. That one, and the way that I don't remember the exact words that the person used, but the gist was something along the lines of L. Ron Hubbard kind of having this fake Navy, right? In the Sea Org, or this fake Navy career, and his past not being completely what he said it was.
Lying about his actual naval record.
Yeah. Lying about his naval record.
I thought you were talking about the fake Space Navy for a second, but
which tied into the fake Space Navy, because was it because he was in the Navy that he started the new fake Space Navy kind of thing? I'm like,
so.
I mean, totally makes sense today. I'm like, yeah, obviously, right? He didn't cut it in there, so he went and started his own Space Navy. I love that word for it too.
The fake Space Navy. It is
Space Navy. I served in the fake Space Navy.
I had totally forgot that there was sort of a whole track space opera origin story for the Sea Org, and that the Sea Org symbol with those I call them petals. I don't know what you call them. I think those stand for the number of planets in the Galactic Federation, and I was like, oh shit, I actually forgot all about that. Because it's not something they really talk about in the Sea Org. They talk about we come back, and that means you're supposed to reincarnate as a Sea Org member. But someone pointed out to me that their understanding was that the original Sea Org members were like people who had come back. They were like reincarnated from the loyal officers of the Galactic Federation. And I was like, shit, that might have gone right over my head. Actually, it really is a fake Space Navy.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. I think they were called the loyal officers or something like that. I don't remember exactly either. And I do remember, like, that was the idea, is that you lived before, and that, like you were saying, that was a belief that was pushed, I think, and I think it was a way that the cult tried to make people feel special, that they're special, like they're saying, many are called, few are chosen. Unless somebody has already come up with a different way of saying that, we got to come up with some other. Many are called, few get out. Many are called, no one joins.
Everyone is accepted, few will come.
Yeah. That's a good one. I heard a couple the other day. I'm kind of late to the party on some of the funny things people have come up with about Scientology and these sayings. And I had never heard this one. And someone put it in the comments, and it was, "Not today, Thetan."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just still dying about it. I said it to my Tony. I'm like, I was telling him about it. Somebody did this comment, and it was, "Oh, not today, Thetan." He's like, "Oh, don't say that." First he thought that, he's like, "Did you just develop a speech impediment?" Because, Thetan, Satan. And he didn't realize that, it was actually a joke. And I'm like, no, it's a joke that somebody put in there. And I've been with him for 10 years, and we don't talk a lot of Scientology terminology, and haven't. And I forget that he hasn't heard a lot of the words. I have never seen him have this reaction before to a word. It's his version of moist. Thetan.
Oh goodness.
He was like,
he
I
doesn't
just
like
can't.
it.
No, it really, really rubbed him the wrong way. And I've never seen him react that way to a word.
There are a lot of people who think that that was sort of L. Ron Hubbard's like wink, wink joke. That him dabbling in what did he dabble in?
The occult, black
Dabbling in
magic.
the occult and the black magic, and that Thetan is really Satan, but like with a lisp. And personally, I don't think that's what it is. I mean, did he came up with a real story of how he came up with the word, right? It was the Greek letter theta with to the nth power or something, which sounds so cheesy. I can't even stand it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what it was? Is that what you remember?
That Thetan meant? Yeah, it was something about the Greek word, from the Greek word theta.
But was it really just adding an n to theta, or was it like with the n, like with to the power of n or something? I don't know.
I don't remember exactly. We were obviously dilettantes, Aaron, and have many misunderstood words. Otherwise, we would.
Somewhere here, I actually
that.
have a copy of the Scientology Tech Dictionary, and I wonder if it says it in there.
Maybe actually it would because it usually gave the origin it gave the origin of a word. Kind of sidebar here. How do you feel about the, like looking up words and things like that? Some of the, things that in Scientology that you're forced to do.
I think it's common sense that if you're trying to understand something that is being said, spoken or written, that if someone says a word you don't understand, it would behoove you to find out what that word means so that you can be smarter and know things and understand what's being communicated. But I don't buy into the whole thing of like, oh my God, stop everything. If we don't look at this word up right now, I'm going to go blank and I'm going to disassociate it. I'm going to start committing overts, and then I'm going to restrain myself from committing overts, and I'm going to pull in motivators, and I'm going to get sick and have accidents. Like, it's not a big emotional deal for me, but I like looking up the definitions of words. What I won't do is look up every other definition of that word, use it in sentences, and then look up the derivation. I, in my entire life, have never benefited from looking up. Thank God I know this word came from Old English and used to mean root. It's like so stupid to me.
Exactly. It's like Scientology had stock in dictionaries or something.
But I will look up definitions of words mainly just because I want to know what someone's trying to say.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I mean, do you look in an actual dictionary?
No, I just do the Apple lookup thing or
okay.
Whatever browser window I'm using.
Yeah, same. And same thing. I don't look up the derivation of it. And that's something I agree with you 100%. I'm not sure that unless I was going to be in a spelling bee, that's when I think understanding the derivation of words help you, because you're in a spelling bee. So if you can understand, that's why they'll often ask, what's the definition? And sometimes you can figure it out based on where words are derived from, if you know the root definitions. Outside of that, and I was never going to be in a spelling bee. So that was one thing that I was like, okay, we're supposed to do it, so I'm going to do it. But I'm right there with you. It just seems kind of stupid and useless.
Okay, so let me ask you this though. Demo kits while you're studying. Have you ever in your entire time in Scientology been helped by the use of a demo kit?
I think that, you know what? I think off the top of my head, I feel like yes, because I could kind of like put the concept out here, and you take these random pieces of things and you go like, this represents a person and they talk to this person and then they go over here. It for the way that my brain works, that kind of helped. And it doesn't feel stupid. It felt stupid for a long time. I almost would kind of like, do it a little bit on the side, kind of like quietly, or just not so full in it, but I like the clay demos. We got to do a lot with clay in Scientology. You make things out of clay to show a concept, just because it beat just sitting there nonstop, reading. Or my least favorite thing, and this is going to really date me. We're listening to Scientology lectures on those reel-to-reel tapes.
Oh yeah. They already had the regular tapes by the time I came along.
Oh God, it sucked. When I went originally for the training program to do the magistrate training, the big tapes and the reel to reel, that's what they were using. So I'm like, oh great, not only do I gotta be here all these hours, I gotta learn some kind of audio visual thing here. I
Right.
hated it. I hated it.
So when you mentioned the clay demos, that's the follow-up question I was going to ask you is, did you like them because you enjoyed playing with the clay and it was a nice break and it was fun? Or did you ever actually get anything out of them? Because I never, ever, even once gained anything by doing a clay demo. I couldn't stand them. They just made courses take longer. It felt like a chore, and I couldn't stand them. What's your take on them?
I really did enjoy playing with the clay. I think because I was a kid. I was 15 when I was doing that training program. But you do these in pretty much every major course in Scientology. You read something, and then you have to maybe do a clay demo, a demonstration in clay of the concept. So if you're trying to understand the concept of what is affinity, you would show it in clay, because L. Ron Hubbard said if you can show it in clay, then you have an understanding of it. For me, it was like I think part of how I coped with a lot of Scientology indoctrination and the repetitiveness of all of these freaking rules we had to follow and things is I tried to make it into a game. How well could I do this? How cool could I make it look?
Yeah.
It just, I needed to do that to survive. I needed to somehow make it, fun. So I had a little bit more fun with it. I don't think it was anything earth shattering. I think that if it was, I would still be doing it as I've learned other things. And I don't. I'll make sure if I'm having a hard time understanding something, that if I don't understand a couple words in a sentence, then the sentence isn't going to make sense. But I'm definitely not going to go clay demo it. And I've not used a demo kit or done any of that either. I don't think it's necessary. I'll maybe draw something out to understand it, but it's also kind of triggering. Like I don't think I could do that or want to do that, because a lot of these things, especially when you grow up in Scientology, it feels like a form of punishment.
Yeah.
Remember how you'd get sent back if you would be, so in Scientology, there's a check sheet of things that you need to do to get through a certain course, and you sign off on each one. Or if you have a coach who's helping you, they have to sign off on it. So you do that with the clay demos and everything. And that just got so repetitive that even now it's like I have a hard time working with checklists. I love a good list. I do. I'm a Virgo. I love making lists of lists. But if it's instructional, especially if somebody's giving it to me, then I'm like,
Yeah. Well, you injected a lot more positivity into it than I did. I was like, he says, if you understand it, you'll be able to represent it in clay. I go, yeah, which means I already understand it. So why am I wasting my time putting this into clay? It's not actually helping me. It's just proving I already understand it. It's a complete waste of time. And for the demo kits, I'll tell you, the only thing I found the demo kits useful for is getting the course supervisor to leave you the hell alone. Like if you're sitting over there demoing things, the supervisor will not bother you. He's like, oh, he's doing that guy's doing what he should be doing. And so even if you're just bored as hell with what you're studying, and all you got to do is bust out that demo kit and pretend to be demoing, and not only do you look like you're doing great, you're doing your job, you're being a good student, the soup will leave you the hell alone. And you get 3 student points for every demo that you do. So I'm like, I got to rack up these demos and but I didn't feel like they ever actually helped me with anything as far as comprehending or being able to apply and understand and all that kind of stuff.
It probably really slowed down the whole process, when you think about it. And the reason for doing it, it kind of goes back to me for that Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard's point of view is very much one size fits all. That this work, he creates this method of doing something and how to do it. Therefore, it works for every person. And people just don't function like that, just are not like that. And I'm still shedding that part of it. And I mean, honestly, like real recently in the last couple of years, especially the last year, in understanding that we learn differently. People learn differently. Some people in real estate, we have to do continuing education. I want to do it online. I do not want to do it in person. Other people need to do it. They want to do it in person. They learn better that way. There's no one size fits all for that. And that, I think, is where a lot of the damage comes from in Scientology, that just kind of layers one on top of the other, is this belief that, well, because I did this thing in Scientology and it didn't work for me, then I'm somehow damaged, that I'm somehow flawed. There's something wrong with me. I have out ethics. I'm committing crimes against Scientology. It's kind of like trying to, like, if, me today, I'll wear a size 8 pants. If I try to squeeze into a size 2, it's not going to fit me. There's nothing wrong with me. But if that was the standard, was you needed to, like fit this size 2, that's crazy making. And when it's crazy making and it doesn't work from you, then you start getting these unusual solutions and, maybe develop an eating disorder, whatever it is. But the truth is, the lie is that you ever needed to fit into the damn pants in the first place. Just get bigger pants. And that's a big flaw in Scientology, where I think it's sometimes, for me, it was a big one to get rid of, that I'm not flawed because this didn't work for me.
Yeah, doesn't it seem like to a certain degree, Scientologists are all trying to be like each other? I say each other, but someone might go, well, they're all trying to be like LRH. And you go, well, how can everyone be trying to be like a 60-year-old man? That doesn't ring true. Someone might say, well, they're all trying to be like David Miscavige. And you're like, no, like if you're on staff and if you're in the Sea Org, people adopt a lot of the same mannerisms and methods of talking and speaking and writing. But there's some like ideal that everyone's trying to attain. I think it's more of a personality thing. There's like this standard Scientology personality, or they might call it a beingness.
Yeah.
That where everyone's kind of like each other.
Mm-hmm. That's completely
But they're
true.
not really taught to just like each other.
No, there's no acceptance. You hit the nail on the head. It's not get to know somebody and they get to be who they are and you get to be who you are. It's something that L. Ron Hubbard talks about a little bit, but it gets so twisted because he talks about this. There's this concept in Scientology of granting beingness, which would be letting somebody be who they are, and then you can be who you are. That goes completely out the window the second that who you are being doesn't further the Scientology agenda. So then you start realizing that, wow, this personality, who I am. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't get into more trouble in the Sea organization. And that's part of why I worked hard to keep myself at the most low-level posts I could come up with. Because I knew my personality just wasn't, if I was just being who I was, I probably would have been kicked out way just earlier. But that's where I think it's damaging.
That's why I was wondering if anyone had gave you crap for doing the beauty pageant, because that's not something you hear of. That's not something you hear of or see done in Scientology at all. And I can see people being deeply uncomfortable with someone doing something that David Miscavige might think is a little too extra, And and the DSA was actually supportive of you, which is interesting.
Because it created positive press. I think that is the only reason I was out there, basically this PR machine for Scientology, because, they took credit for what I was doing, which is so interesting because you're like, well, wait, I thought that the Foundation for a Drug-Free World is secular and has nothing to do with Scientology itself. Yet the person working with me is, at the church. It's another example of how it's just a complete and total utter lie that that's what they're doing. And if I'd had that experience and I went to the Foundation for a Drug-Free World back then and was, greeted or approached with how it should have been, like, yeah, this is great. Let's do this. How can we help support you? Do you, how are you doing with kind of like in dealing with all these things with drugs and my past history and my dad, just like none of that. They didn't care at all about any of that, which was really like, I don't know about you, but when I was leaving Scientology, I made 2 lists. I made one list of everything I thought they would come at with me about and try and embarrass me on. And I started talking about it and writing about it in my column and sharing about it. And the other list was the things I wanted to do, things I wanted to try that I wasn't being allowed to do in Scientology. And I have done a lot of them since. But that it's just some of the, I feel like when whether you're thinking about leaving or you're getting ready to leave, there's this exterior influence, which is the cult and the cult mentality that kicks in, and you hear that voice of, well, you're probably going to be hit by a bus for doing something so horrible like this. You're only going to be able to work at McDonald's, and there is nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. Sometimes I think, like, when my kids were younger, I'm like, go get a job at McDonald's because then you can have all the French fries.
Well, any Scientology staff member would make more money working at McDonald's anyway, so I don't see
Yeah.
what the problem is.
They would. And why was it too? And I don't know, maybe it was just where I was in the Sea Org and these handlings. It was always like McDonald's was the worst job that you could have.
In my opinion, it's a trickle down effect from David Miscavige. He would always say this: flipping burgers, flipping burgers, flipping burgers. Like all these guys at Int will tell these stories of Miscavige always being like, you're just going to end up flipping burgers. And I don't know, it's this trickle down thing. It comes from Int to the Sea Org, to the staff, to the public. It's weird.
Yeah, you're totally right. That makes a lot of sense, how those things just kind of go down like that.
Or Natalie, how about this? How about all Scientologists ending their letters with much love, ML or much love?
Oh my gosh.
That's just trickle down from the top. People all over the world in Scientology did not just independently start signing everything much love. Even the most vicious, nastiest reports, much love.
Yeah. You're an idiot. You're a loser. You're blah, blah, blah. You should be declared a suppressive person, you piece of crap. Much love, Bob.
And it's funny, when I my first job out of the Sea Org was working for one of the Scientology business consulting groups, and everyone who are staff there is former staff members and former Sea Org members, and they sign their communications much love, and the consultants would sign their emails when they're sending to their clients, even that, like, ML much love. And this one consultant there, his client was a woman, and the woman's husband saw the email and hit the roof that this consultant was telling his wife much love.
Wow. I think I learned later that that's kind of one of the traits of a cult, is this mimicking of the leader or the leaders and taking on that persona, which is why, things trickle down with people just being such buttholes and being so nasty with all the yelling and the screaming. And at the time when I was in the Sea Org and on staff, I didn't know any of this about I did not know that David Miscavige was kicking the ass of anybody around him. It's like talk about misunderstood. It's like he thought the Int base was Fight Club, and nobody talked about it until they did. And that really did trickle. I'm fortunate in that I didn't witness, but again, I was at the Dunder Mifflin level and below. I wasn't witnessing a lot of those things. It was more the sleep deprivation, depriving people of food, forcing them, because their statistics were down, that they would need to eat rice and beans, which, having been a person who worked in the dining room, I hated that, because, like, the flag bureau crew would come through, and if they were, on rice and beans, as it would be called, you got to, you'd have to put it out, and they kind of would have to regulate. Like, you have to go into the rice and beans line and get your rice and beans.
Right.
And they weren't, it just breaks my heart even now. Like, you weren't allowed to have butter or add salt and pepper. Some of them did it anyways, and I never stopped them. I'm like, I'm a steward here in the galley. My job is not to, like, police the salt.
Right. That's right. People would get in trouble for trying to spice up their rice and beans to make them somewhat enjoyable. And they'd be like, this is supposed to be a punishment. And you're like, well, it's still a punishment if it's the only thing I'm allowed to eat.
I know. And I don't even I actually like rice and beans. I didn't have to eat them a lot. Fortunately, I don't recall. I think one time we were on rice and beans, and I remember thinking, like, this is not that bad.
No,
but I know people who
it's
will
not a
need
punishment. It's not a punishment to me.
Yeah.
It's incredibly healthy. I mean, it's not nutritionally speaking, if you're trying to have a high protein diet, having rice and beans is like, I can think of worse things to have to do.
Yeah.
So when I was in the Sea Org, I was like, okay, I mean, it kind of sucks because I want to be able to eat the other stuff as well. But hey, maybe I'll, lose a few pounds this month.
Yeah, exactly. But I just felt so bad for those people. But this idea of taking on that persona of the leader, that is so much of that's such a cult trait. And when you leave and you learn more about other cults, like I love learning about other cults. I love the cult documentaries. I just like cannot get enough of it. And in large part because it's helped me realize that, yeah, for sure, Scientology is a cult. It's run like a cult. There's just evidence after evidence that it's a cult. And you look at it next to some of these other cults, and it's very similar behavior in how they control people, in how they use trauma, in the way that they use shame. That's so big in Scientology. And we talked about this before in the Sea Org and on staff, their whole hang up about sex and everything is just absolutely, it's crazy making and not workable. You know, why is it you would think like, okay, it's 2023, maybe even when it was the year 2000, the year 2010, number one, could they stop calling it heavy petting? You're in trouble for heavy petting. It's 1950 called and they want their words back. How many times like people had to clear that up because it's like, well, what's heavy petting? And to be honest, I was never fully clear on it because I'm like, well, would it be touching me here? Would it be touching me here? Would it be
or what about touching here lightly instead of heavily?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were so hung up.
Did you watch the documentaries on NXIVM?
Yes. Yeah. I think I even finished it. And yeah, I think there were like 2 or so of them. And it does seem that that's the interesting part too, is a lot of these cults tend to kind of turn into some twisted, sexual activity. And I don't know, maybe that's why the Sea Org and Scientology is so hung up on the whole sex thing, because it just blows my mind how you look at the people that they'll protect, and they will only protect people if it means protecting the church. They don't care about the individuals. And Danny Masterson, great example. You've talked about that a ton. They're not protecting him. They could probably give a crap about him. It's how him being found guilty and how that makes Scientology look. That is always their concern, which is why I got in trouble for strip fitness. Well, guess what? Nobody cared in the real world. Nobody in the real world. I wrote a column about it. I told everybody in my community that I was doing strip fitness. Nobody cared. And they make such a big deal about it. And it just creates these weirdnesses around it. And I've always wondered, why? Like why that is. Is it because the people tend to get in trouble, if you allow this heavy petting? I mean, I never quite fully understood.
I could be wrong. I think it stemmed from what happened when they started the Sea Org and all the Sea Org members on the Apollo were just banging each other all day and they couldn't find anyone to show up to post.
It was totally the 70s.
I'm exaggerating slightly. But it was the upsets that were created on this ship from everyone sleeping with everyone else and everyone else's wives that L. Ron Hubbard was like, oh, remember that policy where we said we weren't going to regulate anyone's sex lives? We've completely done a 180 on that.
Yeah.
And that became Sea Org morality. And then David Miscavige, in my opinion, is the one who took Sea Org morality and said that has to become the morality of all Scientologists. And staff members who come to Sea Org bases have to live by Sea Org morality. And then those staff members go back to the orgs and they think that that's Scientology morality, not Sea Org morality. Yep. And then eventually all Scientologists become these puritanical fucking weirdos, which was never really supposed to be the way it was.
No. When you talk to people who from like way back when, they even say like, yeah, it was different. There were still some things that were like, okay, probably not okay. And little on the culty side, but there wasn't as many of those hangups. And you're completely right. That mentality gets taken to the next level. And then it just starts to spread as, just like a cult. And it's so ridiculous because you're like, that's your big concern. And when you go out into the world, when you leave the Scientology world, your dad blew 3 times off the Apollo.
Cheryl, who did he blow though? Who did he blow? That's what, let us know. Okay, go ahead.
So what was I saying? I totally forgot. I was like so sucked into that. Squirrel. Shiny object. Oh yeah, we were talking about
No.
let's talk about sex, baby. Oh, I probably shouldn't sing songs that could be copyrighted.
Oh yeah, that's gonna ding us.
Well, it was short. It was short and obviously not recognizable.
It won't. It won't.
But the mentality of that puritanical part of it, like you called it, that's the part for me that was so insane and that I rebelled so much against, obviously, because I did a lot that just blew their mind. But it's when you take that even outside of this organization and you go with that mentality and you leave Scientology, and this is just my personal belief and point of view on this. I think letting go of some of that is part of shedding the cult culture, because people out in the regular world, in the real world, some of them, yeah, they're hung up on it, whatever, but most of them are not. That's, I got sent from Hawaii to the middle of nowhere at 13 for 3 months, banished from my home to live in the cold because I kissed a boy. That's all I did.
Yeah.
I kissed a boy. That was it. And I didn't even like it, which was a real disappointment. It wasn't even the super enjoyable thing because I was 13 and still a little tomboyish, and the tongue in the mouth thing back then, I thought it was gross. And to take action like that. And remember, I was sent to Hawaii as punishment for kissing this boy by my grandpa dad, who broke up his marriage to marry my mother, who was married to his son. But I'm the asshole. I'm the one who's so out ethics and I need to go away. That's a really good example of how that mentality carries over, yet it's all a lie. It's all a lie, Aaron. And that's what I found in being on the outside and in the real world, and the people that I would meet. Most people I know are doing something halfway, kind of like, or they're lying about it. It's just, there's too much judgment on, and I'm not saying like we should all go crazy and it should just be one giant whatever, but that all of the judgment on it, let's like let it go. Let's just kind of like realize that we all at one point or another do something absolutely stupid. And I think growing up in Scientology and being in the Sea Org at a young age like you, we didn't have that time period to have those experiences and grow up from it. Because even experiences that might not be, like something that you would consider that you should be doing or experimenting. Let's just talk about even experimenting with drugs or with marijuana. I grew up in Hawaii and had never tried cannabis before. I think my sister and I are the only two people to ever grow up in Hawaii. It's so much a part of the culture. It's everywhere. And we never did until we were far into our adulthood. And they're so over the top about that. Oh, I wonder, hey, how are they handling that now with legalization of cannabis?
Oh, it's still, they still see it as pure evil.
Really?
And I've tried to have, but even before I was declared, I would try to have conversations with Scientologists about this. And I'd be like, now hold on. It's less dangerous than alcohol. Mm-hmm. And the argument I would get back, which is such a lazy argument, is that doesn't make it right. You're just adding more, you're adding a little bit of bad onto something that's already bad. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not arguing for the criminalization of alcohol. And that's worse than this other thing that you're arguing for the criminalization of. You don't see the contradiction there. Like, well, if alcohol's bad, there's no reason to make a society even more unsafe by adding another substance, even if it's not as bad. And I go, oh, they really don't understand how things work. They're just,
and especially
L.
now,
Ron Hubbard said it. We have to figure out how it's true.
No matter what year it is, no matter that there's been so much more science and studies done on this. And that is the thing too, that makes Scientology a cult, is there's no change. The policy stays the same. Everything L. Ron Hubbard said stays the same. The homophobia stays the same. And you can say, well, okay, he wrote Dianetics and Science for Survival back in the 1950s, where people saw homosexuality differently. Okay, then, but why is it still followed then? When I worked, in the dining room, in the galley as a steward, that's where they would send people who were busted for sexual perversion, which often were people who were engaging in homosexual activities. they were busted to go work with me. So I got to hear the stories, and gosh, I wish I could remember this one guy's name. He was just a kid. Well, I was a kid, but I felt like he was a kid. I think he was maybe 16 or so. He had blonde curly hair, and he got in trouble for homosexual activity. And he was busted down there, and sadly he had, tried to seriously self-harm himself. And then they still punished him for it. And it's like, where are you going to not, how are you going to keep following something that somebody wrote way back then like that? I mean, even Christianity, there are sects in Christianity which have changed their point of view on it. Not everybody, but nothing ever changes. Nothing's ever updated. I mean, there's policies and flag orders even on how to wash a car, how to do laundry. What about with the advent of new, better washers? I mean, just does it change? Are people still doing it these ways that L. Ron Hubbard said to do it just because he said to do it?
Yeah, totally. But it's not a cult, and they don't worship him. It's what's true for you is what's true for you.
Yeah, that's another one.
As long as what's true for you is what's true for me.
Mm-hmm. Did you?
You want to tackle?
You? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you? I actually never got the story on how, when you left, did you leave the Sea Organization, or were you public then?
So I left the Sea Org in 2006, and I did not get declared until 2014.
Oh, wow. Why did it take so long?
Well, we weren't, I mean, because I didn't do anything to get declared until like 2012.
Oh. You were a late bloomer.
When we left the Sea Org, we were not trying to leave Scientology. We were just having a baby.
And but you weren't sent to a Class 5 org?
Oh, no, that wasn't even allowed by the time in 2006 rolled around. So, we routed out. They gave us our freeloader debts, our lower conditions. We moved to Clearwater because that's where my wife's family was living, still is living. And but I never really wanted to be a public, but I didn't want to be declared either. Yeah. So I paid off my freeloader debt. I never did my conditions. Eventually, they were so hard up for new service starts at Flag that they were letting XSO people who'd paid their freeloader debts but not done their conditions start books and lecture courses at Flag. Wow. So I started the Dianetics books and lecture course, and then I started the Science of Survival. And then something eventually happened where they're like, oh, all the XSO people, you can kick them out again. Or if any XSO people get into any trouble, just kick them out. Wow. And I think I was starting to get into some trouble with posting on blogs and stuff like that. So, one thing led to another. 2012 is really when things, 2009 is when I mentally started leaving Scientology, but it wasn't until 2012 that they sort of had enough circumstantial evidence on me to be like, we don't like this guy anymore. And it wasn't until 2014 that they actually had enough to actually declare me. So, wow.
And that was after the Tampa Bay Times came out, Truth Revealed, that whole thing.
Yes, the Truth Rundown. That was it. That was the eye opener for me. And then, but you see, for me, that was really just more electrifying. And what's funny? The whole idea that David Miscavige was like beating people up, the part of that got me wasn't that he would do such a thing, but that int management was an environment where he would feel he needed to do such a thing. I always and I don't mean like, oh, they deserved it. I mean, in my mind, int management was supposed to be this utopia where there was no stat push. There was no stat motivation. Everyone was hatted and trained and clear or OT. There was no public screaming and demanding service. There was no one writing reports to RTC. That I just thought it was like this little heaven.
Valhalla.
And so it wasn't like, and it wasn't like, oh my God, David Miscavige would be prone to violence. That's not what it was for me. It's like, oh, int management isn't a great place to be. For me, that was the my whole staff and CEO career. I'd only wanted to go to int management. Wow. And I always thought everything would be great up there. And it turns out the reason the Sea Org was shit is just because it was such a trickle down effect from the pure unadulterated upper level shit. It was even worse at int. I thought everything would be better at int. So when I found out it was even worse at int, That's what was a paradigm shift for me. Not that, oh my God, David Miscavige would hit somebody. That didn't actually bother me, to be perfectly honest. It never occurred to me. I figured if he was going to hit someone, it would be at some lower level org. It didn't occur to me that he was. Do you see? Like, the upset was that in management was a place where that would occur, not that Miscavige would ever do something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of finding out that your heroes are not heroes,
right? Or that if international management isn't a utopia, then Scientology doesn't work. Like, for me, that's like 1 + 1 = 2. If international management is not some perfect example of what a Scientology world would be like, which is ironic because it actually is a perfect example of what a Scientology world would be like. But if international management is not this perfect place and a shining example of what a Scientology world would be like, then there is no place where that is true, and Scientology does not work. That's what it was for me.
How long from when you realized that, like when it hit you, do you think that, did it hit you and you accepted it right away? Like, oh my gosh, this is the truth. Or did it take some time and repetitiveness of seeing those things that were wrong?
I needed something to like just really, really drive it home for me. And that was when I heard from Dan Kuhn, who was the RTRC director. So Dan Kuhn was Joe in the Pro TRs film. Did you ever see the Pro TRs film?
Yes.
So he's the guy who L. Ron Hubbard passed and said, you have perfect TRs and all this kind of stuff. Or at least so we're told. It turns out L. Ron Hubbard might not have been the biggest fan of Dan Kuhn's TRs. But his post in the Sea Org was the director of the LRH Technical Research and Compilations Unit in the Senior CS Int office. If anyone on planet Earth knew what L. Ron Hubbard left behind, it was Dan Kuhn. If anyone on Earth knew, or at least this is how I was thinking, if anyone on Earth knew whether there was the upper OT levels, whether they existed or not, it's Dan Kuhn. And when I heard from Dan Kuhn, I mean, maybe he might have intended to leave something, but we've gone through every scrap of paper he left anywhere. And if there's any mention of what's supposed to be on the upper OT levels, we weren't able to find anything. And I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. I'm done. There was no existential crisis. There was no, what do I believe? And what do I don't believe? And what's true? I was like, oh, no upper OT levels. My belief in the upper OT levels is the only thing that was allowing me to rationalize how incompetent all of the OT8s and OT7s I've ever met have been. Like, how unimpressive. Like, I had met Sea Org members who I would think, oh, I would like to be more like that person. Like, they just exuded competence and whatever. I had never met an OT8 that I was like, oh, I think I would like to be more like that person. They just all seemed so wrapped up in their own problems and their own importance, and and the high level Sea Org members, at least the ones that they would send down to us and put on a really good show for us, they didn't seem to be like that. They didn't seem to be all wrapped up in their problems and significances, and they were just competent. At least the people. I'm not even talking about David Miscavige because I never met the guy. But, there were certain Sea Org members from INT who would come down and grace us with their presence and either give us briefings or come down on missions. And they were impressive people. Yeah. And those people are the ones, and thinking that the OT levels will make you more like those people or 1,000 times better than even those people. It's that kind of belief that kept me believing in the entire thing. But when you find out that at INT management, everyone's just as paranoid and stat motivated and scared as everywhere else. And when you find out that there are no upper OT levels, then for me, I was like, oh, well, in other words, there's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing, because all we were ever operating on was hope and some promise of something that would be coming in the future. And if that's not there, then what we really have is nothing at all. Yeah. And what else are they lying about? Yeah. And I was pretty okay with that. Actually, I didn't have some like crisis about it. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense, especially the way that you experience that, because you're so right. You have this idea of who these people are. I would see the international executives on the base, and it would just be like, you just thought that they were just so capable. And some of them were, but I think that people are who they are. And I think that
that sometimes people who, even if they had not gotten in Scientology, that they would kind of be a certain way. And then in Scientology, they're still going to be that way. And then when they leave Scientology, you are who you are. You might have more baggage and more things that you're dealing with, but that's being human. My baggage just came from growing up in a cult, but each of us has these different types of baggage. And I think those people in the Sea Org, even that I idolized, they would have been that way even outside of the Sea Org, and probably better, because think about how competent and capable some of those people were without, if you didn't have all of those threats and stress and the world's going to end if you don't do this and you don't sell that and all that, what they could have accomplished. And I think you see that sometimes with people who leave Scientology and leave the Sea Org and go off to do and create the lives that they want to live and do what they want to do and find interesting ways of doing it. They would have been doing that before. They were just more held up and impeded by Scientology. So they weren't these shining examples because of Scientology.
Right.
I think it's just who they were to begin with. And in going through the upper levels that I did, it was really more about getting through it. It was painful.
I'll tell you what, on our next video, I want to pick your brain about the OT levels that you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a crystal clear memory of them? Because some people actually struggle to remember some of the details.
Well, I don't know, crystal clear. It's not something that I've talked about, because it's even when my family left, and when my mom had been on OT7, it was not the first thing that we were going to. I kind of had all these questions about grandpa dad and, things that I remembered that I never had a way to verify. And I had 2 years with her before she passed away, and we just never got to some of the other stuff. But I would love to, because again, it's part of continuing to shed that. And the more I talk about it, the more then I start to remember these things. But it just hasn't been conversation where it's like, hey, let's go grab a drink and talk about my body thetans. I probably talk about it more with people who were never in Scientology, who saw South Park. And they're like, is that really the big confidential material? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, pretty much, and how you handle that. But absolutely, because I can tell you things that the processes and what you'd run in session and what would come up, and how you'd have the e-meter and just kind of managing all that, what's real and what's not real. To this day, I don't know. And we can get more into that later, but I definitely do remember some things that made me question.
Yeah. You want to tackle some questions here?
Yes, this is my favorite part.
Okay. Liz Gale mentioned, I did the course, How Babies Are Made, as a kid. And that was a crazy clay demo period of life.
Just get a circle of clay. How Babies Are Made. I don't know that. I wonder if that came out later, because I'm pretty sure I'm quite a bit older than Liz.
I think there was a number of kids courses that sort of came and went. And this might have been, I don't know if that was in a Liz, I'm not sure. Was that in at Delphi, or was that at an org? Because I don't remember that course specifically. But but there were a breed of Div 6 or kids courses that kind of came and went, a couple different breeds or generations of them.
Yeah.
Anon says study tech is a huge, massive waste of time. For the most part, it is. Again, I still think there's value in understanding what a word means. I mean, that's how you get smarter, really. I just know what does a word mean.
I will say this. I do, when I'm I like to learn all kinds of new things. And with YouTube, it's amazing how much you could learn. I'm ready to do surgery on someone. You can learn everything. So when I'm doing something, I had to replace my shower diverter, when you turn the thing on and the shower's supposed to come on. And I was watching a YouTube video about it, and I was having a hard time. The concept of going back to where you were last doing well, that has actually worked for me. And I think that's probably one of those more universal laws. It's kind of common sense. It's getting all gunky and you can't quite figure out these steps here. Well, if you just go back to before you got confused and just start over, then, it makes sense. But that's so common sense and not just Scientology.
It is. Cornelius says most ADHD people love clay. Well,
can
I
see
guess that's
that.
not me then. I don't know. Let's see. VJ Burke 70. I'm with Aaron about demo kids. Don't waste my time. Play the game.
Yeah.
Gary Moorhead Jackson is in the chat. He goes, "You're correct on that point, Aaron. I think Jackson commented in response to the flipping burgers discussion."
Oh yeah, totally, completely. I haven't seen Jackson since we used to do these Sea Org reunion get-togethers back in like 2010 or I think 10, 11. We did a few. I hosted one in Minnesota, and I got to see him a few times there.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. I met Jackson when he came here to Clearwater. I never went to any of those meetups. That was actually before I got declared.
Yeah, it was before because it was, I don't remember if the one we did in Minnesota was 2011 or 2012, but I remember like we went to Texas, going to Clearwater after having been declared and going back. And I think we all went to the Starbucks. I don't know if it's still there. There was the Starbucks. Yeah. Yeah. And hung out there
still
for
there,
a while.
but it's always empty because the new flag building opened up and they've got like 3 different cafes in there, and the Sea Org members have no reason to go to Starbucks anymore. So
wow,
they screwed
I
Starbucks.
want to go to LA. I've not gone back to L. Ron Hubbard Way since I left Scientology and the Sea Org. And I just want to go back and just like be able to just be there and see how long it takes security to come.
Creepy as hell, I got to tell you.
Yeah, and it's a public street, L. Ron Hubbard Way, but boy, they just get you off of there quickly. But just as part of my whole process, I just want to go back with people because I've had so many nightmares over the years of being taken back, that they're going to force me back, or the worst nightmares are when I actually agree to go back. I want to like physically put myself there, knowing that there's no power there. I'm not going back. There's no draw. It's almost like I stopped drinking alcohol like 6-7 years ago. And for me, it was just a bad habit. That habit's not there. The draw is not there. I want to experience that in a large, Scientology area. And in Clearwater, I think we just went to the Starbucks. I didn't even go over by the base. So if anybody wants to go and do this sometimes.
Well, if you're making a trip, let me know. I'll find a reason to go out there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, how fun would that be? Nellie and Aaron do L. Ron Hubbard Way.
Passenger Shaming says NXIVM is so similar, in my opinion. It is shocking how similar NXIVM was to Scientology.
It's like they studied it, the tactics.
Yes. Well, Keith Raniere definitely did. I just even Sarah Edmondson is one of the women who was the main one of the main figures and recruiters. And she has said that he did study Scientology. I just don't know exactly where and when. Like it might have been at a mission. But there's no question. I mean, literally took the same terminology. Who else uses the term intensive like in a context that is similar?
Yeah.
As a noun,
That's totally true. Was it what came before Eckankar? There's Eckankar, Est.
Est and Landmark. Est came first and then Landmark. What's Eckankar?
Eckankar, their headquarters are here in Minnesota, actually not that far from where I live. And my understanding is Eckankar it came after Est. And I could be wrong on that. Don't have all my cult history down. But yeah, it was like Est, and Est was started by ex-Scientologists. Because that's why Est
was Earnhardt an ex-Scientologist?
So. Something like that. There was some ex-Scientologists involved in it, and that's where they were on the list of suppressive groups that you couldn't associate with. And Eckankar is on that list too. And I remember having the understanding that it's because Eckankar came from Est. Est came from Squirrel Scientologists. And
Landmark also came from Est.
Yeah, Landmark came afterwards. It's all rebranding. See, even these other cults, they rebrand, but Scientology just sticks with the same stuff.
Let's see. D. Mill. What does Scientology tell its members that SPs and enemies of the church are trying to accomplish when they have platforms saying it's a cult? What's your take on this?
My take on this is what they believe, and I know this because they've told people who know me this. that suppressive people like myself ultimately want to smash and destroy other beings, want to hurt and stop other beings, that we're dramatizing something like the effects of psychiatry on the whole track. And the whole track in Scientology is like the entirety of the past. So it's just a giant dramatization that we're doing. If you're truly, like a suppressive, not just a potential trouble source where you're being influenced, but that's the justification, because they want to position this label of suppressive person with being psychotic, with being crazy, with being violent, with being things that people don't like. It's all positioning, which is why I love so much, which, by the way, I need to get an SPTV logo
Oh, okay.
so that I
I'll
can
send
put
you
it
one.
on my channel. I
Yeah.
love this SPTV because, one, it takes the power away from Scientology and it makes being a suppressive person a cool thing, which has got to just piss them off so bad. But I think that that's it. What do you think?
I mean, you nailed it right on the head. Some people get even lazier and say that we're being influenced by big pharma and big psych,
Oh, yeah.
and that gets just down an even crazier rabbit hole. Um, but even if you go, okay, but what's behind the big pharma and the big psych, it would go back to what you said.
Yeah.
Motivated by this effort to keep people down and suppress people, and that comes from an incident where basically they were almost destroyed and they're still stuck in that incident and they're not in present time and all that kind of stuff. God forbid it's ever just people honestly pointing out horrible abusive policies
Yeah.
and practices. God forbid.
Yeah. And the fact that they'll too, like when I left and I told them I was leaving. I was excommunicated later. And I was so I was fine. I knew that I would end up being declared because I was told that multiple times. But I was like, I left Scientology. And now you're telling people that I was kicked out, that you
Right.
excommunicated me? No, I broke up with you.
Exactly.
I ended it. And even
Exactly.
that they try to take away from you and make it like, no, we had to kick Natalie out. And I'm like, no,
That's
no,
right.
no. I broke up with
Well,
you.
they create that circular logic where they go, well, leaving is a suppressive act. So if you leave, then we declare you a suppressive person and we expel you, even though you're already gone. Now you're double gone, and we can say we
Yeah.
goned you. It's so stupid.
I broke up with you.
Wonder Woman, int management sucks, and there's no OT levels. I'm out.
What?
Yeah. Becky, Sam, of course, destructive cults can only operate if there are smart and competent people who run the system.
Oh, that is such a really good point. And you're right. You're totally right. The only reason anything I think ever happened and got done in Scientology and the Sea Org were from some of the people who were like, okay, well, we're here. We might as well do this. And we can, because again, I believe that you are who you are. And the more you can shed that baggage, then the more capable and stuff that you can be. But it's so piled on. People are so suppressed in Scientology that the people I look at we talked about that I admire, I often have that thought, I would love to see that person out, because what could they do in the world? What could they be? What could they experience? Because they're just such capable people to begin with, not because of Scientology, often in
Yeah.
spite of it.
Yeah. Who's one of your favorite people you'd like to see? Like if they left Scientology, you would love it and you would want to reunite with them.
Ooh, let's see. Reunite. So somebody that I know.
Someone
Other than
you really loved in Scientology, and if only they would leave, if only they could leave.
if only they could leave. There's a couple. First that comes to mind are some of my really close friends that I have had in when I was living in Seattle, and even after I moved, I would later on in life, after I, became a public Scientologist again, I would go see them. I would absolutely love that. There's about 3 of them out there in Seattle, 5 that I would absolutely love to see leave and have that freedom. And it's especially sad because I know a couple of them for sure, wanted out, had their doubts, saw the outpoint, saw what was happening, saw the writing on the wall, but they were threatened with, because they had kids in the Sea Org, that, if you continue talking to Natalie, if you continue going down this route, then, your child's going to have to cut ties with you. What about you?
So for me, it's my old friend Paul Stein.
Mm.
Paul and his wife Diane Stein. And I want to say a little thing about this, because in Scientology, I have said, and other people have said, there's no such thing as a real friend in Scientology, because it's always so conditional. It's always conditional upon your standing in Scientology. And yet in Scientology, I would argue there's still a distinction between people who are friends with other people because of who they are in Scientology. And then there's people who you're friends with in Scientology because you genuinely love who that person is. Like, you actually connect as human beings.
Yeah.
And it's a shame if Scientology gets in the way of the friendship, but you were friends because you actually really liked each other and not because of who you were in Scientology. Does that make sense?
100%.
And so Paul Stein and Diane Stein. Diane, I think, was the DSA Atlanta. Paul was probably the Reg of the DSEMSEC Atlanta. And then they moved to
where
Clearwater.
did you meet them then? Oh, they moved to Clearwater. Okay.
I met them when I left the Sea Org and started working at Measurable Solutions, one of the wise business consulting groups here. And Diane was my senior, and Paul was the Reg, and Paul was just my best friend. Like one of the closest, honest to God friends I've ever had, Scientology or otherwise. And it's one of those things where he's such a good person that I know that even as he started to have to distance himself from me because of Scientology stuff, he knows, and I know, that it's because he has to play by Scientology's rules, and not that he honestly thinks I'm now a bad guy.
Yeah.
And so but his daughter's in the Sea Org, and his daughter's married. And, I even know the guy that she's married to. And Paul and Diane love their daughter more than life itself. And they would suffer on in Scientology for the rest of their lives if they had to, even if they didn't believe, but they do still believe. But even if they didn't, they would never in a million years give up their relationship with their daughter.
What if the daughter left? Do you think they'd leave
if the daughter left? Oh my God, if their daughter left, Paul and Diane would be out of there like the Roadrunner. And I really truly hope that happens one day. I think all these young women, this generation of Scientology Sea Org members, I believe all of them will eventually leave to have kids. I don't believe that any of them are I just think that this generation, like, being exposed to the internet as they are, I know not to a large degree, but just to the degree that they are, and they can see how much happiness is available out there in the real world. I truly believe that one day, Paul and Dan will leave Scientology when their daughter does. And when that day comes, Paul will do more UFC fight nights. I've left this comment up here on the screen because I wanted to say something here. I think this comment reflects why Scientology is actually shrinking. And it's because L. Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige, over time, have gotten rid of the smart and competent people who are actually causing Scientology to expand in the first place.
Obviously, I mean, we're not there.
And this started when L. Ron Hubbard was still alive, because David Miscavige used his particularly important position that he had to control communication to and from L. Ron Hubbard to get L. Ron Hubbard to order people to be removed that Miscavige saw as threats to himself. And Miscavige is just not as smart and competent as, if he were smart and competent, Scientology would be expanding.
Yeah, completely.
If he were smart and competent, he would change the things that prevent science. Look, damaging cults can expand. Like, the capacity for human beings to accept and support bullshit is pretty great. Scientology has become a particularly uniquely brand of awful that has prevented it from expanding. And thank God. But I'm just saying, I truly believe that this is why Scientology is failing, because they have gotten rid of the smart and competent people that were actually pushing it up.
Yeah, and they're being run by a dictator who has the temperament of a 3-year-old who missed his nap.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's see. I have one here. Emma Robson, first super chat for me. Aaron, I'm a never-end and have watched for years. Fully support you and love the new direction. Love to you all from the UK. Thank you very much, Emma. I want to make sure I do not forget to show one more time. And we're not done with the video yet, but I want to show. Let me pull up the right one. This is Natalie's channel, guys. If you're not subscribed yet, highly recommend you jump over there and subscribe to Scientology Life After a Cult. Natalie and I are going to be doing a lot of stuff together. Now, I would also be very remiss if I didn't at least share with everyone watching something I shared on my community tab earlier today. And that is just about Doug Kramer. This is very sad, everyone. Doug Kramer, I want to say SPTV creator. I don't know if Doug considered himself part of SPTV or not. I considered him part of SPTV. And he passed away of natural causes last week. And I know there's been some speculation as to the nature of his passing, but a report was released that did make it crystal clear that he died of completely natural causes. It says arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and then other significant conditions, cigarette use. Now, I know, Doug had a live stream scheduled on his channel 2 Mondays ago that he never showed up for. And I know a lot of his viewers have been trying to get basically a welfare check done on Doug since then.
Yeah.
And it was only yesterday that his mother, who, if I understand correctly, Doug had only reconnected with kind of a few months ago after having been disconnected from her for many years. And it was only...
Was she in Scientology? The mom?
Had been. Yeah, Doug was second generation. And guys, I haven't done a video on this yet because honestly, I've done videos about people passing before, but it's usually when Scientologists pass. And the reason I've done that in that case is because I felt the circumstances under which those certain Scientologists passed provided an opportunity to make a greater point about certain things that Scientologists believe. There have been a lot of former Scientologists who've passed, even ones who are friends of mine, that I've never said anything about because there was no good reason for, like, in order to do a video for me, there's usually a greater point that I'm trying to make when I do a video. And just the fact of having passed does not warrant me doing a video about that person. In fact, that would be somewhat exploitative of me. And so what I've been trying to wrap my head around is there a greater point that I want to make, or that I think Doug's passing, or the circumstances of his passing, do the circumstances of his passing, are they such that there is a greater point to be made? And I'm just not sure that there is. I've been racking my brain about it all day. I mean, for what it's worth, guys, Doug and I, Doug and I probably haven't spoken in close to a year. I've never met Doug in real life. We did an interview on my channel. I did an interview on his channel. But the relationship was a little bit weird and a little bit strained. We never had a falling out per se. We never shared negative words. But, for me, I have to think twice before doing a video about someone having passed, because I need to, for myself, make sure it's not just somehow exploitative of what really is a private situation.
Yeah.
And thank God I didn't do a video about it before we found out what he actually died of, because I would have been one of those people speculating about how he died. And I'm glad I did not do that. I'm really glad I did not do that, because
look at that self-control.
I might have. So as it stands right now, guys, I feel like I will end up doing some kind of a video about this tomorrow, but I don't swear to it. I have to, for myself, feel like there's really a message and a point, and not just, hey guys, someone died. Like, that's not even what I do when a Scientologist dies. Like, hey guys, a Scientologist died. Isn't that interesting? Like, it's not interesting. It's sad as hell. In all cases, it's sad as hell. There's one thing, and maybe I'll dig into this a little more tomorrow. Like, one thing I found fascinating when I interviewed Doug was just how much his experience as a public Scientologist had deeply, deeply, deeply damaged him. And I think there is, you could forgive non-Scientologists who've never been involved for thinking that the deeper or the higher up you are involved in your organization, perhaps the more damaging or destructive that it is. And in some ways that's true only in respect to how close you are to David Miscavige. Like, the closer you are to David Miscavige, the more abuse you suffered at the hands of David Miscavige. But that public Scientologists, whether someone is a public or a staff member or a Sea Org member, Scientology can hurt everyone involved in those echelons in very deep and sometimes very different ways. And I'm saying that because I don't think Doug ever joined. I don't think Doug was ever on staff. I don't think Doug was ever in the Sea Org. But the stories of what he went through and experienced as a kid growing up in Scientology, and even as an adult, as a public Scientologist, I mean, just really devastating, heartbreaking stuff. And that's why I think it's so important that there's like 100, 200, 300 former Scientologists telling stories and getting other people to tell their stories on YouTube, so that people can truly understand that all across this spectrum of experience in Scientology, it's almost like no one comes through this unscathed. No one. And that being a public Scientologist does not mean that's like the lowest level, like that's the lowest levels. That's not. Being a public Scientologist is what all of Scientology is built on top of. Like public are almost anyway, I don't want to be too long-winded about it.
Yeah,
But,
I think sometimes the mind, the mental abuse and the spiritual abuse, that it's the physical abuse is mostly what you saw with David Miscavige, and mental and spiritual abuse. And the everyday public, weren't getting their asses kicked that way. But it's still, I just saw people and families devastated financially, mentally, just when, I just have to make a note because I'm going to check and see if there's something I can talk about, and I need to tell you about it, but we won't talk about it now. But you're totally right.
Okay.
As somebody who watches your channel, I would like to see maybe somebody who knows them, maybe talk to somebody who knows them too. I didn't endote, but I would love to
That's a good
hear
idea.
their thoughts and their memories about him, and definitely what his struggle was. But I would also love to hear what was life for him afterwards. I guess I can go and watch some of his videos too.
Yeah.
And find out that way. But I think that'd be great.
And guys, because I have my platform and I do what I do, I will simply say the fact that Tony's mother requested that this be kept private until his next of kin could be notified, and the fact that Tony Ortega couldn't respect that request and just gagged at the opportunity to break this story the moment he heard about it, is why so many former Scientologists won't have anything to do with Tony Ortega, and why I encourage everyone leaving Scientology to do not talk to Tony Ortega. So I'm just saying that, guys, because that's what I do here. I look out for my community. Tony Ortega is not a part of my community. All right. Well, let me see. There was something else that popped up here. Karen McCourt, thanks for sharing the official cause of death to stop speculations. Yes. I thought that is the least I could do. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. One last time, jump over. Let's see if I can do this quickly enough. Please jump over and subscribe to, here it is, Scientology. Life After a Cult. Thank you for joining us this evening, everyone. Thank you as always to all of you who watch until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right